Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, and on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Councilmember Curtis Jones, who will share his priorities for the 2025 council session, and Vanessa Maria Graber will share a report on the opening of the new Kensington Community Development Corporation. But before we get to that, Denise, anything of interest going on?
There was this press conference at City Hall on Monday about the Sixers and the decision by the Sixers and Comcast that instead of building this new arena in Chinatown, or the new arena near Chinatown that we were talking about entirely too much on this program, they've decided to partner with the Flyers and with Comcast to build a joint stadium in, you guessed it, South Philadelphia.
And before we bring Lance and Vanessa on, I just want to say that this started in earnest in September. The legislation was introduced. From September until now, there were thousands upon thousands of hours spent on this, dozens, if not hundreds of meetings. How many hearings and hours did we spend there listening to this major thing? That never happened or will not happen. So let me bring in Vanessa Maria Graber and Lance Haver on the program.
Good evening.
Good evening, Lance. And I think we have Vanessa here too. There we go. So we spent all this time getting this arena legislation through council, and now it just turns around. It's going to be moved to where it should have probably been from the beginning. So who wants to go first?
Well, I think there's a sense of relief, especially from people who have been organizing against this proposal. There was a really large coalition of organizations that were part of Save Chinatown. There was members from Washington Square West, the Gayborhood, Black Philly Against Chinatown, and many organizations that joined in the fight to oppose this plan to build an arena in Chinatown. So there is definitely a great sense of relief. There was a victory party last night in Chinatown by the coalition. People were celebrating that Chinatown's now safe and no longer in danger of having this huge arena impose on their historic neighborhood. On the other hand, there is a great sense of frustration that this decision was not made by city council members or the mayor. This is a decision that was made by 4 billionaires who got together and decided to change their mind and make a deal that was most profitable to them. And so I think almost every week, Denise and I mention the word oligarchy, and we have to say it again in this case this week, because when we have billionaires who are making policy and who have more power seemingly than our elected officials, this is definitely a case of oligarchy. And I think even from the mayor's staff and city council, they were not aware that this deal making was happening until very recently. There's some questions around the building trade unions and how long they've known about this, but they might have known about it much longer if they were in favor of this new deal, speaking to the press about it, having approved it, I guess, through their ranks. And so there are questions about how long they were negotiating with the billionaires for this deal. I think the public reaction is mixed. We know that there were people that supported the arena in Center City that are disappointed and are asking questions about what will happen to Center City's revitalization. There is supposed to be a plan to revitalize Market East Of course, no word on what that is, how long it will take. And so people have a lot of questions about the future of Center City, especially with the recent news of the Macy's closing in Center City. On the other hand, there's people that were really against the arena and are really frustrated that city council members and the mayor did not listen to their concerns and the results of the impact study. And again, this decision wasn't made by them. And so I think there's a lot of constituents out there very frustrated with this entire process. Many things were put on the back burner in the fall because city council was focused on this. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to know what is going to happen with that $60 million community benefits agreement and the lease agreement that was part of the legislation.
Well, I think we can kind of answer the whole community benefits agreement question. It's done. It's gone. The mayor said as much during her press conference. And to be honest, and I'm just going to come right out and say it, the only thing that can stop one group of billionaires from doing something is another bigger group of billionaires. Everybody in the Save Chinatown Coalition needs to sit down tonight and write Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, a very nice thank you note. Because if it weren't for the fact that the opposition of this stadium was getting on the NBA on TNT, and if it weren't for the fact that China is a market that the NBA is trying to penetrate, you would have a brand new stadium going up near Chinatown starting in 2026. And it's a shame to have to put it that way, but that's what happened. If Adam Silver had not stepped in and said, because no one polices their brand quite like the NBA. Just ask Donald Sterling, who was forced to serve his team, sell his team for being a racist. The NBA polices its brand like no one I've ever seen. And when the NBA starts hearing that people are doing things that are contrary to its brand, they step in. To be honest, if the late David Stern were still the commissioner of the NBA, the stadium there would have never been discussion of a 76 place, because he'd have stopped that in utero because it looked bad.
I would also argue the power of Comcast, right? Like Comcast being headquartered in Philadelphia. Comcast also has a brand. Comcast did not want to compete with another sports center in Center City. They want to keep the Sixers, and they've made that clear. And again, at the end of the day, this isn't about kindness or sympathy or wanting to look good. This is about the amount of money that can be made. And the New Deal is going to make them a tremendous amount of money. And that is why they decided to put their differences aside and make this deal. Let's not forget Comcast purchased a minority stake into the Sixers organization and also is a media partner with the 76ers, is going to be airing their games on Peacock and NBC. And so again, it is in their benefit to work together and make these deals so they can make even more money and add to their wealth.
And the thing is, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, this doesn't really benefit the Sixers a whole lot, the Sixers themselves, because the original idea of building this was because the Sixers wanted their own money. Now they're partnered with a team and an entity in Comcast that has traditionally not served them well. If anyone remembers when Ed Snyder, who at one time was the president of Comcast Spectacor, the late Ed Snyder, if anyone remembers when he owned both the Flyers and the Sixers, you kind of have an idea of why those of us who are longtime sports fans are looking at this and saying, how many times do you have to get whipped before you realize you're getting whipped?
I think there are a couple other points. The first is Vanessa referenced the lease-back agreement. So the city was leasing the land to an authority, Paid, and Paid was leasing the land back to the 76ers. And in exchange, the 76ers were going to pay $10 a year for that lease for the next 30 years. hidden in all those words is the line item that says the lease is assignable. So the terms of those lease can be assigned to whoever wants to take it over. And it is true that PAID, the Pennsylvania Authority for Industrial Development, rightly named, right, PAID Development, and the city have the right to say, no, you can't transfer it. But if you read the actual words, the words say they can't do it unreasonably. So if a new developer comes in, they're going to get the 30-year tax break, both on real estate tax and on the use and occupancy tax. They're going to get free land, and they're going to get, they're only going to have to pay $10 a year for the lease. The second thing is the concept of shame seems to have been gone. Now, I know people like to put this on Donald Trump, but it's not just Donald Trump. This is what has happened in our society as the newspapers close and as there's less and less media. There's less and less ability for people to feel shamed. So we have elected officials who are telling us we needed this arena to save Market Street East. And after they find out that the billionaires are going to change the plan, are saying, well, this was a better plan all along. This is really what we wanted. And no one really asked them, well, if this is what we wanted all along, if this was a better plan, why didn't you come out for this before you decided to give the owners of the 76ers whatever they wanted? And the third thing, of course, is most of our elected officials lack the backbone to stand up and say, we will not be controlled by billionaires. Even though they have the money, we don't run the city for them. We run the city for what benefits people of Philadelphia. And there is no benefit to what putting the arena in that location. As I think we've said time and time again, every poll that's ever been taken showed the overwhelming majority of people in Philadelphia were opposed to putting it there. So I think those are lessons that we can look at. One is when you get an authority involved, you take away the public's ability to change the plans. Two, there's really not any difference between what Donald Trump says, he's going to end the war in Ukraine tomorrow, and what a Democratic city council and Democratic mayor say when they say, yes, we need this, but now that we're not going to get it, we really wanted this all along because this is better than what we had. And third, that there has to be at some point a reckoning for people who believe in democracy to say democracy is one person, one vote, not $1, one vote. And we have to stop the billionaires from telling us that they're doing this for the interest of the city. I want to make one final point. The owners of the 76ers say, well, they really care about the city of Philadelphia. They want to help the city of Philadelphia. They want to rebuild Market Street East. Well, here's what they could do right now. They could move their headquarters out of New Jersey into Center City, Philadelphia. They could pledge to buy locally every single item that they use. And they could do what the football Green Bay Packers do. Take half of the shares of their company, half the shares of the team, and give it to the city of Philadelphia. Give it to the school district. Give it to the people of Philadelphia. If they really want to help us, if that's really their primary concern, it's really easy for them to do by just buying locally, moving the headquarters here, and taking 50% of the shares of the stock and donating them to the people of Philadelphia.
And they wouldn't be giving up. They'd still make a lot of money. It's not like they're going to go broke doing this. But Lance, you bring up one of the points that we've been talking about since we found out this was going to happen. What happens with the legislation? Can the legislation be revoked? It's already law. What happens is, just a little refresher for people, if a bill is passed in city council and it's signed by the mayor, it becomes law. If it's not signed by the mayor, it becomes law after 10 days. It's one of the quirks of the city charter. Not a lot of people realize that there isn't a pocket veto, except for the very end of a 4-year council session. That's a whole different story. But in the midst of a council session, it just becomes law unless the mayor vetoes it. So this is law now. Regardless if the mayor signed it or not, it is law. And one of the concerns that we've been talking about is what's revocable, what can be changed or nullified by passing new legislation, and maybe some things can't. And the lease agreement was one of the things that we're a little bit worried about here, that maybe it can't be undone.
What we heard again was
So-
the idea that through these processes we can identify the needs.
Okay.
That's something that I think is a concern to me and a concern to other people we've spoken with, especially because right now it doesn't seem like anybody knows what to do about all this legislation.
I think that's exactly right. And, you know, we heard the mayor again talking about how important this was and how critical this was and how this was going to rebuild Market Street East and rebuild the city. And now, of course, she is saying, well, it's better to have two developments than one. And will that cost her any votes? Will the council president who championed this and said this is what we needed, and now is saying, no, what we really needed was the two developments, will it cost him any votes? And at the end of the day, if we don't participate in the democratic process, if we don't hold people accountable, if we don't say to elected officials, hey, you can't lie to us and expect our votes, then we end up with people like Donald Trump. We end up with people who will say almost anything, and then we'll say it doesn't matter. So we have a candidate who says he'll end the war before he takes office, then saying, well, I'm not going to end the war. Say, I'm going to bring down grocery prices, but I'm not going to bring down grocery prices. And, you know, those of us who are not on the side of the Republicans tend to say, well, you know, that's just Donald Trump. But here we're looking at that from the Democratic Party, from people who are supported widely through the city of Philadelphia. If you look at the vote for the mayor compared to what former Councilman David O got, it was lopsided. It wasn't even close. But is there no penalty for lying to us? Is there? We know there's no shame because she stood up and she didn't say, I got played by the Sixers and I got misled and I got told something that wasn't true. Instead, she stood up and said it was a curveball, but this is a better solution. And she didn't answer the question, if this was a better solution, why didn't she try this first before she tried a worse solution? And if nothing happens, if the council continues to go along with everything that she promises, if the council leadership, which promised all this and it didn't come to fruition, pays no price, why should they stop? Why should any of them stop misleading the public, stop lying to the public, stop taking money from the billionaires and doing what they want if there's no price for them to pay for it?
Now, Lance, and everybody on this program knows that you will never find me and Mayor Parker having a drink at happy hour anywhere in the city. You know that's never going to happen. But with all due respect, that's kind of unfair to say that this was that they were lying to people. They didn't even know that negotiations were still going on between all of these entities when all of this was called off. I have to think that there is a little bit of good faith that they had, that they were, using to make some of these decisions. But that said, the very same entities who came before council and asked for money for this, asked for the different things that they needed to build this stadium, they're going to come to council again. They're going to come to the mayor's office again. And as you know, we heard from one of the council members, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That if they can come back to them with the same proposal and not necessary and no more due diligence is done, then by all means, let's get the pitchforks and the torches and go to work. But I think that they got as lied to as the rest of us for most of this process.
Right.
I will
I
say,
think
though, many lies were told by the mayor during those hearings and during the town halls and public engagement process. I mean, one lie was that she had met with leaders in Chinatown from the Save Chinatown Coalition. That absolutely did not happen. And she repeated that lie many times. She also said that the people online that were posting videos and content opposing the arena were bots and not real people. That also was misinformation and a lie. Many other lies were told. It was a rushed process, and there was a lot of things that were not transparent at all. And so, to Lance's point, the way that they went about the process was really, really problematic. And I think a lot of people are very frustrated. And I do think that the people of Philadelphia are owed an apology for the way that they went about that process, broke a lot of trust with the community, all to be played by those billionaires. I do think there needs to be some accountability for that. And there were absolutely many lies told by the mayor and people negotiating on behalf of her.
I'm not saying that there should be no accountability, but I do think it's kind of unfair to say they lied to us on purpose. I don't think they lied to us on purpose. I think, if anything else, these folks were lied to and they passed the lie on. And I think that sure, there needs to be accountability for that. But I also think that most of the accountability needs to go to the Sixers, because they're the ones that told the lie.
so. Just,
I
just to-
agree. But during those town halls, Mayor Parker absolutely lied to people, and the Sixers did not tell her to lie that she met with the Chinatown people and did it, right? You know what I mean? Like, the way that she went about this process to get what she wanted was very, very unethical and problematic.
Well,
and the Sixers
the
didn't
thing.
force her to go about it that way.
Well, here's the thing. If you were paying attention to the 2023 mayoral primary, none of that shocked you.
So
None of that was shocking to you.
So the point I would like to make is the major prevarications I'm talking about were made after she said they're not going to build the arena. Instead of saying I got played or I was misled or I wasn't told, she started trying to say this is better. This is better than what we had in mind. And that, to me, is what's upsetting. Yes, she lied about that the city wasn't giving any money. The city was only giving land and tax breaks, and she wasn't counting that as money. Yes, all the other things. But here it is. At the end of the day, she had a deal. She got it passed. And then she turned around and found out the very people she was trusting knifed her in the back. And instead of saying that, instead of being honest with us, with the people who elected her and pay her salary, she started saying, well, this is better. And that's where I think the major sense of shame should come in. And I think if you read the columnists, if you read other people, if you listen to people, people understand that. Council member Harity said, he felt like he was a pawn. Council member Jones said he thought like he was at his wedding and his bride left with the limo driver. Most people are willing to tell the truth. They got played, but the mayor's not willing to do that. And that, to me, is problematic. When you have elected officials who look at the sky being blue and say, no, it's not, it breaks faith with people. It's kind of the end of participatory democracy. And it's where Donald Trump makes his money. Just mislead people.
Again, I agree with you on that, Lance, but the citizens of Philadelphia were not paying attention in 2023, and that is what they voted for. Anyone who observed all of this knew that despite the fact having enough egg on their faces to make the largest souffle in the known world, nobody was going to admit that they had egg on their face. Now, what that means politically, I don't know. What that means for the rest of her term as mayor, I don't know. All I know is that, you can't tell me that these deals are both good when you still have a significant chunk of Market East that is still in the same shape that it was before you did this. And there is no plan that you have to say what you're going to do.
And one of the questions I have now is what happens, right?
Mhm.
We're not going to see, in my opinion, I don't think we're going to see legislation for the next arena in this spring session. Budget's coming up. That's going to dominate everything right until June. Because you know how it is. You know, the budget always gets past that last session in June because it goes all spring. Maybe the fall, maybe. And one of the things that people keep bringing up to me as well is council really going to give it to them this time? Is council going to? I don't know about that. Is council going to be able to demand more in a community benefits agreement? I'm not so sure about that because now you're dealing with two teams.
Mhm.
And not only that, you're dealing with Comcast. And this arena is going to be in the place where everybody probably thought it should have been the whole time. So I don't, part of that community benefits agreement, the reason why it was as large as it was because I believe because this arena was going into Chinatown and a very unpopular place to have it. I don't think people can count on city council and the mayor's office being able to play hardball with these guys this time around. That's just me right now looking at it just a couple days after all this happened. But I don't think people should expect, you know, city council really being able to sort of stick it to Comcast and the Sixers. I'm not sure that's going to be able to happen.
I think they'll get more than $60 million. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope, because now this goes from Mark Squilla's district to Kenyatta Johnson's district. And if he ends up negotiating the equivalent of paying $259 a month for a Geo Metro, that's completely his fault. He can't say Mark Squilla did this to me again. He can't say that. So he's going to have to, put his money where his mouth is. And I feel I need to bring this up because it's something that's been bugging me through this entire process. My hope is that the same amount of care and demand and organization that went into keeping the stadium out of Chinatown gets put in when a developer wants to go into North Philadelphia or Southwest or any of the other places where development has just been allowed to happen willy-nilly, despite what the community does and does not want and concerns about gentrification. I'm hoping that the same people who made that demand on Chinatown's behalf make it for people who are not downtown.
Well, it's worth noting that the Stadium Stompers, which was a coalition of organizations, successfully prevented Temple University from building a large stadium in Temple University. So there is a foundation for this. And before the stadium was being or the arena was being proposed in Chinatown, a coalition came together and prevented a casino from being built in Chinatown as well. So I am optimistic that these groups will continue to organize and form coalitions to prevent a lot of this from being put in their neighborhoods. I would like to see that type of organizing when the budget comes, right? Because that is probably the next big thing that council is going to be taking up. And with the Trump administration coming in, I think many of us are anticipating huge budget cuts coming from the federal government, which will most certainly impact us here in Pennsylvania, as a lot of programs and services, schools, all depend on those federal funds. And so that being said, we might also see budget cuts that impact us here for the next fiscal year during this next round of budgeting at City Council.
And that's something we're going to be talking about, really starting very soon, because the budget address is usually the first week in March. usually that first Thursday, usually right after the state budget happens, the city budget sort of gets done. It's already being worked on now. It's usually, it's a continuous process throughout the entire year. But we're going to have some budget experts come on with us in the near future to walk us through that and get us ready for what's going to be, I think, a very interesting budget cycle this time around. Now, Vanessa, you attended an event today that we're very interested in. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, as you might have seen, I have been covering everything happening in Kensington, from the plan to do something to address the opioid crisis and the homelessness problem, and to rebuild the business corridor. Those include, plans from the mayor and the police department, and also more recently, the grand opening of the Riverview Wellness Recovery Home in the Northeast. And again, that's all in an effort to address the opioid crisis in Kensington, and get a lot of those people treatment and services, and permanent housing. And so to that end, this effort that was being led by the New Kensington Community Development Corporation included the grand opening of a community engagement center, which is located on Kensington Avenue, right across the street from McPherson Square, which is a park and includes a city library. And it is a beautiful new space that will offer an array of services. And one thing that was interesting about the grand opening is all of the signage and the artwork that was on display, showing a multi-pronged, community-based approach to harm reduction and self-sufficiency for members of the community. One thing that we learned when we interviewed Bill McKinney last year is New Kensington CDC's community-driven approach to problem solving. And so they have spent a lot of time investing in community engagement and getting input from the community on how to serve the community, address their needs, and fundraise for programs and services that they say they want. And so the grand opening of this center really spoke to that. I also think it was interesting, the framing and the narrative around the center being juxtaposed with the birthday of Martin Luther King, which is today. Folks that didn't know, Martin Luther King's birthday is today. And I think it was intentional that they held the grand opening on Martin Luther King's birthday to honor his legacy and to remind people about a lot of the victories achieved in the civil rights movement were done through direct action, community organizing, and community engagement. So I have a video here of Executive Director Bill McKinney explaining more about what services we'll offer. And then among the many dignitaries that were present was Council Member Nicholas O'Rourke, who also gave a speech talking about Martin Luther King and the importance of his legacy in regards to this new community engagement center. So let's take a listen.
Priorities are, and therefore we can bring those resources. Another thing, as I said, that we are talking about today is that now we have this space. We add for NKCDC this space to what we already have at Ruth and Somerset, right? We've been rehabbing again through the support of a whole bunch of different partners, our old offices, which are on Frankfurt Avenue, down in Senator Saval's district directly. That is opening in February. Right? And so we will have 3 different spaces now that are satelliting services that we provide immediately. We do housing counseling, addressing eviction, foreclosure, tangled titles, all those different types of spaces. We will have our community health workers in those spaces. We will have cure violence team members in those, nutrition education. Those are what people are asking for. We now have the ability to put those in those spaces. But also very importantly, through partners, we're going to be able to do tax prep in those spaces. I don't know if Mike is still here, but like ACLU doing some of the work on Know Your Rights. Regional Housing Legal Services, who's been a critical partner in so many different things that we do, is represented here today. Judy, who sometimes I think she works at our offices because she does so many things for us. So I'm so appreciative of you and of Regional Housing Legal Services. Also, I see Community Legal Services. I know Debbie's not here, but I appreciate y'all being here and being a part of this. Juan Garcia is going to be doing a lot of employment law within the area, again, at these different spaces. Also doing work on record clearing, expungement. There's so many different pieces, but again, the spaces are critical to having them. And again, I thank folks who've been able to make those spaces possible. So all of those are coming to our community starting in February. We are excited about that.
It's a birthday indeed. In our church, oftentimes we will sing when birthdays come around, "Happy Birthday." Y'all know that's a song that was written by Stevie Wonder for Dr. King's birthday. And so we do celebrate his memory today. And I think you all know what I'm talking about with his birthday. This is also New Kensington's Engagement Center's birthday as well. And so them being tied together is particularly important. Exactly 1 year from now, God willing, and the creek don't rise, as my father would say, we'll be here celebrating a year of convening, creating, and community on this day, January 15th, 2026. It just so happens that this engagement center shares a birthday, as we've already said, with Dr. King, who also is a very complicated figure, if you will. I don't know if that was on purpose to have the opening of this center as well as his birthday to coincide together. But if it was, I do happen to see the vision. I hope you all can pick up on it as well. Why does this make sense to me? Why should it make sense to you? Because the work that he was tasked with, that Dr. King was uniquely called to, was some real rough going work. Do I have anybody who knows about his history that can attest to that? Very challenging. He's known for the stops that he made in local communities as a part of a network that worked to help communities understand their full potential, capacity, and their human rights. This center, I do believe, will be an intimate part of how here's a phrase, beloved community finds and meets its potential. How we move from just lifting up or professing what we believe to practicing what we believe. And those who love Dr. King know that he wasn't Moses with tablets in hand coming down from Sinai. He wasn't treated with deference, even if his name and influence did grow after his work. But let me put it more plainly. We'll never know how many times a lifetime resident of some community or other just up and cussed him out in the midst of one of his meetings. But we know that it happened, and it happened often. That's rough going. That's challenging work. And only one part of it. These walls, this space, this room will witness plenty of rough going as well. And many a meal shared as well. And so much joy, I hope and believe. I'm sure of that. Most importantly, these walls will hear your voices. Essential, important voices. That's what matters most, because that's what will keep us here. What we say to each other here, what we speak into each other in this space. We got the signs falling off the wall.
That's it.
Maybe there's a right. There's a message here. Maybe that's an exclamation point. What we say to each other in this space, what we speak into each other in this space, and what collective voice is found in this space is essentially what matters. This is not to say that every idea, utterance, or dialogue will be of one accord. I think we can all agree to that or understand that. But that's not how engagement, a word we say so much we struggle with, what it can actually mean. That's not how engagement really works. Like all things, progress is the product of struggle. So as you find your voice in this space, I imagine it will eventually be used to yell at city council about something or the other. It's all right. So be it. It is what we signed up for as elected officials, and it is what democracy can look like. There is no democracy. Genuine democracy, not just voting, engagement, without sometimes feeling uncomfortable. Is that all right? And a community that can't stare down its own prejudices or air some dirty laundry that needs to be aired sometimes, or even sit with controversial, challenging ideas doesn't have the fortitude, I think, to be called beloved community. Not really, in the sense at least that Dr. King meant it. Working out amidst all of our distinctions and differences, a common life together that we can realize here. Profound forgiveness and lasting change, I think, are what build beloved community. And I know it's what we desire in this space. And as Dr. King said so many times, it's what we ought to be building. So let's build it. Let's realize all the change that can happen right out of this space. And let's realize a new Kensington and a new Philadelphia. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be a part of this.
All right, you just heard from Bill McKinney, Executive Director from the New Kensington Community Development Corporation, followed by Council Member Nicholas O'Rourke. And I had to chuckle when he said the space might be used to yell at City Council members. Again, after a week of controversy and changed plans regarding the arena, glad to see he's still keeping a sense of humor about it. But what a great new resource for the community. We love to report good news every now and again, and we wish them the best of luck. And if people want more information, they can go to nkcdc.org.
All right. Thank you so much, Vanessa. And as part of our ongoing series to sort of prepare people for what's coming in 2025 city council wise, today we interviewed Councilmember Curtis Jones, who spoke to us about some of his priorities. Now, we're going to air some of that next week. What we want to talk a little bit about today, the big story, is the arena. And Councilmember Jones had some thoughts on that as well. So here is part one of our interview with Councilmember Curtis Jones.
Sibling rights. But this lady was getting ready to take the mic over in the hearing, and because she felt wronged by DHS. Long story short, her child was molested while in their care, twice. Later on, this is not the subject, but later on, she was able to sue them and won it successfully, still didn't get her kid back. Pause on that. But what comes up often is if you and I are sister and brother, and we get taken from your house, the relationship between me and you is severed as well. And what we want to do is evaluate sibling rights, to be able to check on my sister, to make sure she's in a good space. And you check on me to make sure I'm in a good space, because those relationships still endure even after our parents are out of the picture. I have a growing contingent of colleagues that are very strong on housing. I was one of the originals to deal with a moratorium on sheriff sales. So I have my cred in that regard, but they've taken it to a whole nother level of moratoriums on evictions, things like that. However, in government, the pendulum swings one way, it swings back the other way, and depending on the period of time and who's being affected, you gotta reevaluate at times. I know too many people that worked all their life as investors into a piece of real estate, or their parents died and they got a piece of land, they're renting it, that have been devastated by squatters. Somebody comes in, during the pandemic, there's a moratorium on evictions. It got good to them. I don't have to pay rent. And now I get more calls, somebody saying, somebody took over my house and they won't leave, and they have rights. And we have to evaluate that to make sure that that pendulum is fair. I understand the resentment in America now to not like the fat cats and the rich folk and all that stuff, but there's some people at a different level that and they're the vast majority of people that have one or two investment properties that can't sustain these kinds of losses. And we still charge them water rents. We still make them pay that electric bill. We still tax them both in sanitation, 300 a year, I think it is, and in regular real estate taxes. There's no relief for them. And so therefore, in the long run, affordable housing goes down. They sell it. They look, I don't want all this problem. I can't afford the administration of these problems. And so we're going to take a look at that to readjust the rights and responsibilities of tenants. And you can't just be a squatter and take somebody's house.
So are these tenants not paying rent? They're just living in the house?
It's worse than that. There's some people that realize that you are in intensive care, God forbid. But they know it. They saw your name, your house, no one's there, they move in. There are people that go around the city looking at mail that is stacked up and looking so they know that the occupant isn't there. And they come in, forge a lease, and they rent it to this one. They're squatting. There are other people that are just going around and actually putting people in buildings knowing that there's somebody overseas or in New York that isn't paying attention. So we have to really kind of monitor it a little better.
How do you do that without exacerbating the problem of affordable housing? Because let's face it, affordable housing means different things to different people. Like, there are people who can afford $3,000 a month in rent, and people who can barely afford $800 a month in rent. So how do you make sure that people aren't squatting without making the affordable housing problem worse?
So I think the problem isn't that. The problem is these national syndicates that are now buying up those properties from the people who can't afford the administration, so they're gobbling them up and then setting the rate of rent through algorithms. They're saying, you know what, Philly is below the market, we can charge 10% more, and it's competitive, if not like abusive. So I think you come out better monitoring that and saving the independent onesies, twosies, the postman, the school teacher that took their pennies and bought a property to invest and rent. So I think we got to save them and then make sure that there's not a monopoly of these national corporations that are buying up the real estate from those individual onesies, twosies, because they can't afford it. The evolution of CPOC, and let me remind you of that.
Well, first of all, could you define CPOC for our listeners in case they don't know what it is?
So it is an independent board that oversees police community relations and allegations of impropriety by Philadelphia police officers. And they oversee an investigatory staff that looks into these things and then presents it to the board to be able to say, we think this officer is right, we think this officer is wrong, and we think this should be the remedy. It was something under Ed Rendell that he really didn't want to do. So it was an advisory board as opposed to a commission, independent, funded. So they used to do things like underfunded, have 2 investigators for 2,000 cases, and it died on the vine because of lack of resources. We then go through this whole electoral charter change. 500,000 people said yes, da-da-da-da, and we, Samantha Williams led that charge back then. We interviewed, we had 300 plus resumes. They whittled it down to the 9 people that you have. Problem was, so we tried to give balance. So we had a judge who will remain nameless. You can find it out real quick. And then you had people from the more liberal side of thinking. And the liberal activists are more direct. They were in your face. judges aren't used to people being in their face, like you're in contempt kind of thing, and they couldn't take that kind of friction, and many of them resigned, and so we had these vacancies. We've gone through an exhaustive search now, which leads us to our priority. We're going to introduce that on the first day back. The new people that we've been able, I think it's 5 of them, that out of over 20 hours of in-depth interview that we've sorted out, that we think create the right balance. And I've got one attorney that did a lot of litigation based on improper stops and, police brutality, that's his thing. But then I have an ex law enforcement person that ran Noble. But I want a diverse group, not heavily one way or another, a fair group that can deal with those George Floyd moments. And we've been fairly lucky as a city that the cases have been black and white in the sense of right and wrong, and you could kind of pretty much tell how it should fall. But there's going to be that case that comes. And these are suggestions to the police commissioner, the district attorney, the defenders, and others.
And also, one of the problems that CPOC has had is the fact that in the police contracts, there's been language that has disallowed for investigations. Mm-hmm. And yet you have this board that the citizens of Philadelphia made it obvious that they wanted to oversee the police. Are you at all involved in the negotiations with the police department in terms of their new contract? And can there be language put into that contract, do you think, that will allow CPOC to do its job?
So the simple answer is yes. We've approached the administration that is doing the negotiations with the FOP and said, you want us to ratify this contract, this must be in the contract.
Now, I had a question, because you brought up, hungry people, and we have to talk a little bit about the poverty level here in Philadelphia. You were a part of the news conference that was held shortly after Macy's decided that it was going to close its store in the Watermaker building. The part of that was supposed to be, that when the stadium issue became something that was spent a lot of time on, one of the things that was talked about.
Hold on, break. I'm traumatized by that. I feel like the guy who was left at the altar of marriage and find out that his bride ran away with the limo driver. That's how I feel, I swear. All right.
But
I can go
back to my question.
I know.
One of the anchors of that was supposed to be the stadium. The stadium obviously isn't going to happen. And then you have on top of it the fact that Macy's has decided that it's going to shut down. You have the Watermaker building. Market East, in many ways, is a ghost town right now.
It's worse than that.
When you look at all of that, what do you think council's priority should be in terms of that? Because you still have this really nagging poverty rate that Philly has had for a long time, and now you have one more kick in the teeth, or in some cases 2 more kicks in the teeth, depending on how you felt about the arena and whether or not it should be there.
What I think, and the reason why I participated in that press conference, is the same word in China for crisis is the same word used for opportunity. Can't get any worse. It's a blank canvas. We can, if PIDC, if the Redevelopment Authority, if the Commerce Department, if the Chamber of Commerce, both African American and Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, put their heads together along with Comcast and along with the Sixers, we can fix that. And the question becomes, I think, if I were given my vision, that should be a little taste of Philadelphia. That not national chains, like every city there's a Gap, but in every city, is there a Denise's Bakery? Let's find Philadelphia businesses so that when someone comes in from out of town, they get a pretzel and a water ice and a Denise's Bakery and a local designer that does clothing. And so that they feel like they visited Philadelphia, not everywhere else USA. So I want us, the person that's staying at the Marriott, when they walk out the door, from where the Macy's is to wherever the new development is, to the Constitution Center. In that walk, they feel Philadelphia.
All right. And we'd like to thank Councilmember Curtis Jones for being with us. And we're going to have part 2 of that interview next week on the program. And I'd like to bring back Denise Clay-Murray. If we can. There she is. Hey, Denise. So we heard a couple of things from Councilmember Jones there. We're going to hear more next week. Council starts next week. We're back already. It seems crazy to think that, but here we are. What are some of the things that you're keeping an eye on, maybe just in these first couple of weeks?
Well, he mentioned affordable housing and the squatters and his squatters resolution or legislation. I'm interested in that because I feel like we've been talking about affordable housing in the city for a very long time. And it would also be a good idea to know exactly what affordable. I've always thought that there should be more than one tier of affordable housing, because what's affordable to you or me may not be affordable to that person who's working 3 jobs at $7.25 an hour. So I'm hoping that will take along that will be what council gets started on when it comes back into session. Unfortunately, I know, because the news cycle is what it is, it's going to be all 76 place all the time, at least for the first 2 or 3 sessions. Whether, the fact that this arena is not going to happen where it was originally supposed to happen is not going to stop it from being a topic of never-ending conversation. And I have to agree with the people who say, we have talked about this enough. This has happened, and okay, we can go back to this a little later, like when they come up with a proposal for Market East or for this new stadium itself or whatever. But we have a budget that's attached to a 5-year plan that at the end of that 5-year plan leaves the city with $14 million in its rainy day fund. We have a lot more important things to talk about.
Absolutely. And I hope that, I agree with you. I hope that we don't see this dominating beyond maybe next week. A lot of people are going to come out for public comment. A lot of people are going to talk about this. I'm sure of it. The usuals will come out. But I'm hoping after that, we can get back to what really needs to get done. Let's talk more about housing. Where are we getting these 30,000 units from that the mayor's promised? We need to really get on that. That $20 million that the city was going to put into Chinatown for affordable housing and things like that. Well, they said that was still coming. Let's get that done now. Let's get that legislation now and start on it. I don't think we should be waiting on these things. That we don't have the time and the luxury for that. People need help now. And the sooner we get started, the more people you can help.
That's true. But my hope is that people understand that that's what we need to concentrate on.
Absolutely. And, and I think the budget process is going to focus people that way, because, we're going to be talking about all these things, and that affordable housing stuff needs to be front and center along with other anti-poverty initiatives. That's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank Councilmember Curtis Jones for being with us. He'll be back again next week with the second part of the interview, and we will see you then on Hall Monitor.
All right. Forgive me. Where is the thing?